So tonight we're going to talk about a variety of things dealing with utility scale solar. We're going to break it down into a variety of different components. We're going to look at a variety of different things as we see this type of solar development as it's taking place here in Pennsylvania as well as New York State. We're going to do this as a immersive tour. And I should back up and tell you that when the quick introduction with the Marcellus Center, you're probably a little confused. We're talking about Marcellus and we're talking about solar all in the same breath. The Marcellus Center for Outreach and Research, our story at this point is really about energy transitions. So we're spending a lot of time really at the convergence of the shale energy development that's been taking place here in Pennsylvania and still is, and will continue to do so for quite some time with the very big uptick in activity that we're seeing with renewables, and in particular with utility scale solar. One of the things that we've learned is there's a lot of lessons that we were able to glean from the shale side of the story and bring a lot of those relationships and lessons and ways to deliver information from those opportunities, again, from the shale side over to the solar components. And a lot of the audiences that we work with, a lot of the stakeholders that we're involved with, a wide variety of different types of stakeholders turn out to be very similar one from the other. So even though the resource might be in different places as you look around the state, we do find that a lot of people are coming to us and asking in a very informed way, asking us a lot of great questions about how they can tap into this renewable side. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk specifically about the utility scale solar. I'm going to take you on a tour. We're going to refer to this as our immersive digital type tour. We do these educational type tours, where we've been doing them in the past in a very physical way, taking groups of people, putting them in a van or a bus and taking them out to the field. And what we were able to do just prior to the pandemic and then in the early side of the pandemic is go out and capture a number of images, string them all together and put together what we're going to see here tonight is our immersive type tour. So I'm going to do a share screen here. So just bear with me as I jump over to that. Okay, unless somebody tells me differently, then I'm going to assume that you can see the first stop on our tour. So whether you're aware of it or not, Penn State actually is getting now that these operations are actually up and running, is getting roughly 25% of its electrical power needs from solar, and it's coming from essentially 3 large facilities that are down in Franklin County, one of which you're looking at in front of you right here. There's 8 of these type of utility scale solar operations in Pennsylvania, and we're going to take you to some other types of facilities as well. But let me, before we get too far on the tour and before we get too deep into the weeds on some of these topics, let me break down solar energy when we talk about different types of solar energy, because I know from many of the questions that we get, people get a little confused on the different types that are out there. So here in Pennsylvania, there's essentially 3 types of solar energy that you might want to be considering if you're thinking about this in the different types of scale. There is behind the meter type solar, and that is typically what you're going to see that's going to be on a rack behind a barn or a house or on a roof, something of that nature. Typically, you're looking at maybe 10, 20, 30 panels. Those are behind the meter, so that the power that's produced is going to be going into the facility where those panels are being hosted. So into that barn or house or running some kind of a small shop, that sort of thing. Then there's front of meter. And front of meter, typically that's going into the grid or it's going by subscription to somebody that's actually purchasing that power. And there's 2 different types of those type of facilities. So one would be community solar, and community solar is actually not permitted in Pennsylvania. When you look at a number of states that are contiguous to Pennsylvania, it's in most of those, but by regulation or by law in Pennsylvania, that has not been finalized and is not permitted here within the state. That said, there are a number of companies that are out leasing acreage right now, or have been for the last couple of years, with the hope that community solar will find its place here within the Commonwealth. So it is something we talk about, and there's a lot of commonalities between what we see with a utility or grid scale solar and community solar. So we're going to use them to some degree, somewhat interchangeably when we think about what the technology is as it's being deployed. And we'll talk about some of those details. The other one, as I mentioned, is utility scale. And that's what you're looking at here at this Franklin County site. And that's what's providing the power that would go to Penn State. About 25% of the power goes to Penn State. Community scale solar is, those are facilities that are about 5 megawatts or less. So you're looking at something that might be 20, 30, maybe 40 acres, depending upon the technology that's deployed at those sites. Typically that would be on one landowner, like one farm or maybe even two that might be nearby, depending upon how it was configured and other characteristics of the siting. But utility scale solar, typically they're something over 5 megawatts. Typically you're looking at sites that are 100 acres, several hundred acres, and we're seeing some in the Midwest now that are measured in sections, section being 640 acres. So you could be looking at something that's 5, 10, 15,000 acres all in one general area. We're not seeing them so much here in Pennsylvania at that scale, but we are seeing some that are approaching the 1,000 to 2,000 acres here within the state. The facility that we're looking at here, again, this is down in Franklin County, and I should tell you a little bit about the technology that we shot this with first. Everything that I'm going to show you, well, mostly what I'm going to show you are still pictures. So we use a camera called a pano camera. It takes 36 pictures all at one time. Press the button, hit click, you get 36 snapshots all together. We send it away, they stitch them all together. And by stitching them all together, then you get what would be a very realistic type of a picture here. Meaning it's just like you were standing there. And we take this and we use this in VR headsets. So you put the headset on, if you've used virtual reality headsets, you know what that's like, and you know that you feel like you're just completely immersed in that site or in that activity or game if you use it for gaming. So we've done the same thing now for this type of energy production. And our driver for this is we were trying to answer the question, what's upstream of your light switch? So whether your power is coming from natural gas or whether it's coming from wind or solar, we put together these VR type immersive tours to be able to do that. Unfortunately, tonight we couldn't send everybody a VR headset, so we're looking at it in kind of a flat here, and we're looking at via a Zoom on a screen. So you get pretty much the same effect, but you can imagine if you didn't have any distractions to your eye around it, what it would be like if you actually saw this. The site that we're looking at here, again, is down in Franklin County. This is, and we time-stamped some of these. You can see this over the course of time when these projects actually go in. This was taken in September of 19, so just before the pandemic. All the leasing had been done to this particular property, and I'll describe it a little further. All the leasing was done, all the permits, all the work with the townships and the county on ordinances and all the permits that might have had to been necessitated in that regard as well. There was also a power purchase agreement that was put in place. A power purchase agreement, or PPA, is something that these big companies, and the company that put this facility in that you're looking at here is Lightsource BP, which is essentially a consortium of two large international companies that come together, one a renewable company and one a fossil energy company, being BP, came together, put this company together, and they're the ones that then built this facility, put together the power purchase agreement, or PPA, with Penn State, to then sell the power. So all the power that they're producing over the course of 20 years with the right to potentially renew that contract is then all sold to the off-taker, which in this case is Penn State. So this facility, again, all that was put in place. And then just prior to the time that I was taking this picture, the company came in, they built some roads, they brought these posts in, they laid them out in a grid, so all that survey work was done. And then, as you can see here, they brought some machines in, started pounding those posts in, and that's the activity that you're actually looking at as we see that here. And zoom in and zoom out, so some of the things we can do with the technology that we're showing here tonight. So those posts, again, they're put in a certain pattern there on this particular property. If you represent maybe a township supervisor, or if you're a planning commission member, you start asking questions like, well, what about runoff? What about roads, or what about other infrastructure needs that might be nearby? So we typically talk about that with some of the different stakeholders that we work with, because they're thinking about putting together ordinances or thinking about the economic development opportunities that might be coming out of this. Again, a lot of the lessons that we learned from the shale side of the story with application here to the solar side. We also try to answer some questions, and I'll show you a little bit more of this particular shot as we go around our tour. But we also have some interesting insert pictures that I think tell a little bit more about the story. We get asked a lot of questions. Well, why here? Why now? Why solar in Pennsylvania versus a place like Florida or Texas or Arizona, California, places like that? Well, the reality is there's enough solar energy here in the Commonwealth and even states north of us that makes solar commercially viable, along with some of the subsidies that go into it and some of the pricing and some of the social drivers and even now some of the bigger market forces that are pushing renewables and this type of development. But you need certain things in the infrastructure. So this insert picture is a picture of a substation, electrical substation. So if this solar development, this larger scale solar development is going to take place, you need some of the things like the substation nearby, some of the high voltage transmission lines nearby to make it commercially viable. Companies are not interested in leasing properties that might be 5, 10 miles or something of that nature beyond. We often get the question, well, why don't they put all these on old strip mines and things of that nature out there? And the reality is they do and will if the electrical takeaway infrastructure is nearby. We also have, let me back up. We also have some other considerations. And we think about, and I mentioned the picture in the background there, it was taken in 2019. Quick graphic here. In 2019 is where solar development in Pennsylvania really started to take off when we talk about these big grid scale type projects. And here I'm showing a graphic about the number of projects that are in the PJM. PJM would be Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland. So if you're in any of those states and some of the other states that surround that, to the east, to the south, to some degree in the Mid Atlantic, and then certainly in some of the states to the west of us, but not up into New England and not up into New York. So projects that are in the PJM really, again, started to take off in 2019. So we had 30 of those projects in these utility scale projects in 2019. We have now about 500 of those projects here within the state. So again, a major uptick, and we'll talk about some of the other considerations for that. But it's important to also understand, just because a project is in the queue doesn't mean a project is going to be built. And we're looking somewhere between 10 and 20% of those projects actually being built, the rest of them falling out of the queue. So 80 to 90% of them won't actually go to construction due to financing, due to ordinances, due to lack of leasing, due to just a variety of other considerations. But other ones will likely show up. So how many will be built in time is still to be seen. In Pennsylvania, the assumption is, or the plan is, so to speak, that somewhere around 80,000 acres of land will transition to solar. And I typically say land surface because that could be rooftops, it could be open fields, it could be brownfield sites like the coal I mentioned before, a cold strippings site. So any of those could be possibilities. And there's lots of others that could be considered as well. And we might want to talk about some of them even in the Q&A. New York has seen just a little bit of a comparison. We probably have some people joining us from New York tonight. You can see that uptick started a little sooner in New York, and not quite as many projects in the queue there, but still a substantial number as well. A couple other inserts here that might have some value from a graphic standpoint. Typically with the technology, we're thinking to make a megawatt of power, it takes somewhere between 4 to 6 acres, depending upon the technology. So we're using 6 acres as our benchmark. We think about the number of acres that'll be needed. And you can see from this graphic that they're spread around the state. Although we do have this concentration down in the south central part, like the picture I mentioned in Franklin County, which is in that area, and also up in the northwest. But when you get down into the southeastern corner, typically where you have a higher population, higher land costs, more urban density, these large projects are pretty difficult or pretty close to impossible to actually build. You see the same thing again if you look at New York State. Closer you get to New York, you see the acreage that's being proposed here in some of these projects in New York State. But as you get closer to the city, you can see that's problematic, and you can see there's no projects that are proposed there, at least as of last look. And same thing when you go up in the Albany area where you have more subdivision and more commercial development. What's this look like from the air? We'll try to give you some different perspectives. So the shots that I'll show you from the ground, actually they're shot bird's eye at about 30 feet, but here you get some that are several hundred feet. This is one of the Nittany projects that Lightsource BP did as part of the power purchase agreement for Penn State. We also get into some discussions. This is a project that's out by the Nittany Mall in Center County. It's a smaller project. It's part of a public works facility. But we get into discussions with a variety of different people about, well, okay, so if this is going to be built next to me, how are they going to hide it? So this is a good illustration of vegetative buffers, how tall they would need to be to screen out nearby houses, topography, and how that's being used. This one's built down in somewhat of a hollow, so there's not a lot of development near there. Different types of screening, again, with fences. We'll talk about vegetation in just a minute. We often get questions about, well, you know, when you're thinking about grazing under these, can't you just raise the panels higher so you put cows or horses or things like that? Because typically they're grazed by sheep, if they're grazed at all. Well, the higher you make the panels, then the higher the fence would need to be, and the more in your face we'll say that fence or that screening might be. So you know, those are concerns, and those are some of the things that we see from ordinance development language with some of the townships and counties and others we work with around the state. So just, you know, some different shots. We also talk about some of the other equipment. So if you're not familiar with these large utility scale or grid scale type facilities, or even some of the community scale, this is some of the smaller equipment that you would see, including, I'll show you some battery storage here in just a moment. Typically, we suggest that that would be built and placed in the middle because some of that might have noise or light. Again, we think about township ordinances and some of the surrounding populations of people if it's near people. A little bit of a drone image, again, to give some perspective. This is actually up in the New York State area, and this is a community solar. But you can see how it fits into the landscape, or in this case, how it fit onto the farm. Still some of the acreage that's available. You can see some odd fields. We talk about that when we're talking with farmers and landowners, and in Pennsylvania, about 82% of what's being proposed is being proposed on open land, and a lot of that's farmland. So we like to talk through and think about some of those things again as we're thinking about some of the farm population that we're dealing with. So some of those odd-shaped fields, how to work with them, how the farmer or the landowner would structure their lease to be able to be paid for those. Do they have access inside the fence where the panels are, or just outside? So there's a whole range of questions that landowners have, the community has, different stakeholders like certainly township officials and county officials have when they're allowing these to be sited, or at least considering them, because all these do not make it through permitting in the end. This is also some battery storage. You hear about that. Here's battery storage relative to the location that I just showed you. I think often we lose perspective when those conversations take place. Well, how big is the battery storage? Well, I'm going to back up. You can see the size of that facility is somewhere between 30 and 40 acres. And you can see the battery storage that's actually in the middle of it there. So again, it gives you some perspective of what's needed, along with inverters and transformers and things of that nature. We also talk about vegetation. So what else comes into this? So if these are sited, we get a lot of questions about, well, are they going to be grazed? And what about this term we hear, agrivoltaics? And agrivoltaics is really the convergence of agriculture that may or may not have been there prior to this, and solar production, or agriculture that comes in after the panels are put in place. And what can that look like? And what is a good scenario, and what is a less optimal scenario? In this case, panels that were put in a soybean field because it was a quick process, but very difficult to go in afterwards and get the seeding that would be necessary on this site to be able to raise crops that could be grazed, for instance. Versus this site, which is actually up in New York State, where the landowner was very specific that they were going to graze the site. So they made sure that they had vegetation that was put in as per the lease language, which they often don't know to ask, which is part of what we do in our educational programs to help them to understand if you're going to do this. And we're not trying to coach anybody into solar or out of solar, but if you're going to do it, you want to understand some of the ramifications and try to get the language that would be most beneficial to you as a landowner, or to somebody that you might hire to come in and utilize, in this case, using a legume.
So we also have, going on this,
I'll just back up. We also have a farmer here. She's going to talk about a minute, give you a little perspective from her standpoint of what she's interested in from a grazing standpoint. So this lasts about a minute.
So what I have growing on this array, there's a lot of fescue, there's really nice clover, there's quite a lot of orchard grass. This actually used to be a farm, and so it's remains of a hay field. And I think in any new planting, what I would like to see would be, in this part of the country, orchard grass gives you early season grazing. I like that. I would absolutely have to have legumes, a couple of kinds of clover. Fescue, I could take it or leave it. And if it is fescue, I'd like it to be endophyte free. Weeds and things will come up, but a lot of what we call weeds are actually really good forage for the sheep, the dandelions, the plantains. So a diverse mix would be just right.
So this is actually on a college campus in central Pennsylvania, and she's contracted to bring the sheep in, and I don't know what her actual rate is, but what we find is the going rate seems to be between $300 and $450 an acre for shepherds to come in and run their flocks through and essentially mow the grass or maintain the vegetation that's in those sites. So if a company, meaning the energy company, were not to bring a shepherd in like that, then they would hire a contractor to come in and mow that. And I'll show you the difference between two different locations up in New York State here in just a couple other pictures. But sheep are often the preferred species in terms of livestock. The reason is because they're not quite as curious as goats. They don't climb on the panels like a goat will. Cattle typically will rub against everything that's in there. Horses, to some degree, will do the same, and that can be pretty destructive to the panels or to the wiring or the inverters or some of those things. And the sheep, they just don't do that. Sheep are also easily situated in amongst these panels. They like the shade and the heat of the day. They can get in under the panels, and then they'll eat the vegetation all through there, including a lot of the weeds that are in there, as you just heard Carolyn mention just a moment ago. We also, when we look down at the site down at Franklin County, the Nittany 1 site, and there's Nittany 1, 2, and 3, it's a living laboratory. So we have researchers and students from Penn State who are going down, trying different types of vegetation under the panels. What's the optimal situation, or what's the optimum type of vegetation to use in there, whether it's grazed or whether it's mowed, and trying to keep out things like invasive weeds that would grow up through the panels and be problematic. So again, what works best? So it's a place that research can be done, and that's part of the agreement with Lightsource BP as well. So you can see some of the different forages. Penn State's also working with a company, Ernst Seed, which is out in Meadville, out in the northwestern part of Pennsylvania, in developing some of these different seed mixes. And then again, as they're optimized for this type of production, then they're used in other places across the Commonwealth and some other states as well. So another good use for Pennsylvania research and application of that same research as well. Just some quick shots here as I go through these. And I like this one in particular because, again, we're not advocating for solar, but if solar is going to be built, these large facilities are built, it's good to see agriculture go in. And very often as we look at these and you think about, the technology, and typically that's what we talk about, the roads and the impervious surface and infrastructure that's leading in, like power lines and things like that. That's all fine and that's all part of the story. But if you're thinking about the agricultural side and you're running a flock of sheep going in there, if you look under the panels, as this picture would depict, they just see a big field and they see the shade that's coming down from the panels as a place to hide out during the course of the day. So again, there's different perspectives here in this, but we're trying to make a variety of illustrations as we do these educational programs. So back to our tour. This again is the Franklin Nittany 1 site. This is 175 acres. Uniquely, this site is fenced, pretty much fence row to fence row. So every part of this site was fenced in, and most of the site actually has panels. I'll spin around slowly, so won't try to give anybody vertigo. But you can see, one in the early stages here in this type of development, what this actually looks like. Then I have some other shots you'll see here in just a moment that take you through some different shots. And I remind you, this was September of 2019. So we're going to jump ahead a couple months, roughly the same spot. This is December of 19. You can see conditions are a little bit different. The reason it's brown is because it's December, so the grass isn't green. The grass had all been there. It was hayfield before the company came in and started building. You can get an idea what the panels look like as they're starting to go in, and if you see the red dot there, that's about where I was standing in the shot that I showed you just before. But you can see the transformers and inverters going in. You can see the panels. It's certainly stockpiled, but some are actually, and this is mid-December, some are actually up and running. And one of the reasons they needed to be running was because some of the tax credits they get from the federal government would have expired by the end of that year, the end of December. So they had to get some of the panels actually in production at that point in time. These are a little bit about the technology. These are tracking panels, different than the fixed panels that I showed you, and there's other shots. Tracking panels are going to track the sun, meaning they're going to move across the sky, kind of like a sunflower moves across the sky from one part to the other. So as they track across the sky, they're going to go from east to west. And they're going to be optimized to be able to pick up the maximum amount of sunlight that hits the surface of the panels. These are monofacial panels, meaning the sunlight that hits the surface, the top surface, is the sunlight that's going to be converted into electric. Panels are about 25% efficient. So about 75% of the sunlight that's hitting the panels is not converted to electric. So that's where a lot of research is being done at the private level, certainly at Penn State. Some of the people that we have that are working on different types of materials to up that, and a variety of other places where that work is being done. Again, these are monofacial single-axis tracking panels, meaning, again, they're tracking the sun east to west. You also have, and a lot of companies are now using bifacial panels, meaning that sun that hits the surface is where most of the capture takes place, but sunlight that hits the ground surface, or think like white snow cover or wet grass, anything that might reflect some of the sunlight back up under the panels, you can pick up a couple percent of efficiency in that regard as well. So that would be a bifacial panel. You also have dual axis panels that not only track east to west, but they can track north to south to some degree as the conditions, or as the earth changes as we go through the seasons. It can make a difference in that regard as well. So that's something to consider. And we do see more and more companies that are using that. We also talk about things like decommissioning. So people want to know about that when they're thinking about their lease, or people are thinking about that from the standpoint of the end of the life of the technology, because a lot of these leases will go 20, 25 years. They might be renewed past that. So we start thinking about, well, what's going to happen with the site at that point in time? So let's just say, for argument's sake, that company at the end of the lease period is going to come in, going to take all the panels out. We want to think about, well, what's underground, and we have some of the cabling that's going to be underground. Typically, that's going to be below plow depth, typically below 3 feet. So some of the PVC piping could be left there on site, but all the wires are going to be pulled out because of the value of the copper or the aluminum that might be in the wire. The panels above ground, all the other components above ground, all that would likely be recycled. We often get the question, well, how much can be recycled at this point in time, and are the facilities available here in the United States? And the answer is, there's one facility that I'm aware of that's up and operating commercially here in the United States. European policy is any new panels that are put in the ground, or put on the ground or on a rooftop, all have to have an end-of-life recycling plan. Here in the United States, that's still in the early side, but there is a lot of value in these panels. What we see right now, the expectation is panels could be recycled down to about 10 to 15% of the total volume, meaning all the rest of it could be reused. Steel, the aluminum, some of the glass, certainly the copper, some of the silver, and some of the other metals are in the panels embedded in the glass, all can be extracted out through physical, through chemical, through thermal processes and recycled. So a lot more of that technology certainly to be developed over the course of time. So again, just spin around a little bit here to show you a little bit more about what's there. Now we're going to jump ahead. This is May of 2020, so the beginning of the pandemic. So if the last one was pretty early in the operating stage, this one now they're up to full operation again, May of 2020. Again, the picture taken at roughly the same place. You see some of the vegetation is still being established or reestablished. The road has been stoned, so the mud that you saw before during the construction season is pretty much gone away. And then we're going to jump ahead, and this is June of 2021. So again, trying to give you some kind of perspective as to the time frame. Roadways and the seeding has all been done. Most of this is legume, a little bit of grass mixed in. To remember the shepherd, what she was saying that she liked. So there's a lot of sensitivity here as to how this property is going to be maintained over the course of time. So a lot of interaction, in this case, between the company and the operator, in this case, the shepherd, and what they would like to see in this particular site. There's access roads to go through due to first responders that might need to get in if there was a fire or if somebody was hurt during the operation and maintenance. Companies would have to get in there to be able to do that type of work, and the first responders would have to get in there if there was some kind of an emergency. We also get a lot of questions about, what about topography? Do companies come in and just flatten out a site if it's hilly? And the answer is no. And you can see some of the roll in this particular site as I slowly spin around. Companies are looking for certain slopes, typically something less than 7%. They're looking for something that's going to face pretty much anything that's not north or northeastern facing. Southwestern is preferred, but they can use something that's more due west or even to the east or southeast. So it just depends on what they can find and what the other characteristics of the site are. They're not looking for something that's overly stony. Certainly don't want something that has a lot of big wetlands in it or wetlands at all, because there's other permitting restrictions there and a variety of other things. If it's covered with trees, that's problematic, and things of that nature. I'm going to jump to a site. It's actually two sites. This is up in New York State. This is two community solars, just to give you some perspective. Power from this one's going to Cornell University. Power to this one right here is going to Ithaca College, which both of those are in the town of Ithaca. I show this picture because the site on to the right is being maintained by two different companies here. It's being maintained by a landscape company that's coming in, mowing it with weed eaters and mowers, bush hogs. And the site to the right, the shepherd, that she's actually standing there in the mauve shirt, she's running sheep through. So two different sites, two different types of fencing, two different types of outcome in terms of maintenance. You think, well, does that matter? Well, if you live nearby, are there provisions in your ordinance to allow sheep to graze these type of sites? There may or may not be. What about running machinery in these sites for the maintenance that would be done 3-4 times a year potentially? So you're going to have mowers and weed eaters running in there on a much larger basis. So you have noise considerations or people coming and going. Again, there's a lot of considerations there. Also use a highlight with this one here for just a moment. We get questions about wildlife transitioning through. So if you remember that insert picture I had that showed, hundreds of acres behind fence, well, what does that do to larger wildlife, bear or deer or something of that nature, or something that can't crawl through or fly over? What happens with them? These corridors, in this case, it was by default because there were setbacks between the two sites, and the fencing then created corridor that larger animals can then go through. So those are considerations. Again, we talk to elected officials when they're trying to put together ordinances We often get that question with landowners that are seeing these, either if they're leasing on their own property or if they're seeing some of this that might potentially show up in the landscape, their township around them. This is back out at State College. Again, a tour to take you some different places. Actually, Beaver Stadium is right up there in the background, so give you some kind of perspective where this is. You get an idea about the topography. It actually, they built it from down in the lower area up onto the hill. They've actually doubled it. It rolls up onto the hill now. This is back down in Franklin County. And the reason I show this picture, this was taken in September of last year, is to talk about, well, what else beyond just the site itself? This particular location, this is in Nittany 1, doesn't have any battery storage, for instance. And we see most companies now, as they're building these larger facilities, are talking about putting battery storage in. So we're wondering on some of the acres that might be inside the fence, for instance, different facilities that we see, not just this one, but different facilities we see, might the company come back in and build some additional battery storage or other types of storage? And so we try to get people, as we're thinking about these, whether it's the leasing side or whether it's township or county officials, to think over the horizon a little bit. Just because a company might be talking about the panels or what they're going to do, with a particular project, maybe there's other components of the project that they're thinking might come in the future, or maybe technology will change, so they're leaving some ground or room to allow for that. And often in that case, I talk about green hydrogen, for instance. Not so commercial here in the States, but finding its way to commercial viability in Europe, for instance, and some other places like South Africa and Australia, as places are looking to put that in. So why do we think about that? Well, something like green hydrogen would be potentially more truck traffic. It would need a water source, but it is a good storage medium, and it does provide a fuel that we can use for heavy industry or transportation, like the steel industry, for instance. It can be used in fertilizer production for making nitrogen. So, there's a variety of reasons that we use hydrogen, and green hydrogen coming from the excess power produced from renewables, in this case solar, could be something that a company would look at as another income stream, another profit center from some of these facilities. So again, it's something that we want to illustrate and talk with people as we're thinking about this going forward. Jumping back up into New York, back up into Finger Lakes, just a quick illustration because of some of the battery storage. This battery storage not in the middle of the facility, but actually to the side of it. The way they constructed this, it's actually in the back, it's in the side, but it's in the back corner, away from some of the residential construction that you can see it's nearby. Battery storage, it's not terribly loud, but it does have fans for cooling. So it is something that, we want to think about when these are being sited in a variety of locations. And then lastly, as we go back, two last pictures here, and then we'll move to questions. We go back to the Franklin County site. We talk about this grazing. So something that was grazed a little while ago, the same facility. They come in with portable fences. There's actually a Amish family. It's a father and son, two different flocks. They're running it through this 175-acre Nittany 1 facility. They come in, they put in these portable fences. I'll just zoom in here so you can see that. Put in these portable fences, put a solar panel, maybe ironically, you can see it there, to run the fence, and then they run their sheep through. They bring water in for the animals. And you can see the sheep that are grazing under the panels there in the background. And then they just run section through section and just keep rotating them around until they get all the way through. And over the winter, they'll run them back to their barns, not the ones that you're seeing there in the background, but some others that they have off-site that are nearby. And these Amish farmers are actually on some contiguous ground, so they don't have to trailer the flocks there. They can actually walk them there. What we see in a lot of other places in Pennsylvania and also some of the other contiguous states where this is happening is you're seeing some entrepreneurial farmers that are moving into the shepherd role, buying flocks, multiplying the flocks out, and then looking at some of the business opportunities in some of these scenarios. The reality is we don't have enough sheep, and multiplying and ramping up sheep production to get to this the number of these facilities that will be built will be pretty difficult. And you also have to think about the market for all that lamb or wool products. And some of that is in some of the big metro areas to the east of us. Some of that supply that's covering that base right now is coming from offshore, a lot of New Zealand, Australia, but some other places as well. So there is opportunity there, but that could easily be saturated with a lot of this type of production going forward. And then last slide, just a different location or different angle. That over there was grazed. You see the grass is shorter, and now the animals are moving up through this. And you can see, again, from maybe that insert picture I showed before, they just herd up and go right through, just like a bunch of small hungry mowers going through there. So even some of the wiring that you're seeing and some of that cabling, they can walk right under that, certainly under the panels. Those panels are moving all day long, but every 10 minutes they shift, again, as they track the sun across the sky. The sheep get used to that, and it's really not so problematic for them as they're grazing through there. Okay, with that, we're down to about the last, I think we have a little over 10 minutes. I am going to jump up to the chat pod. And I am going to take a look at the questions that we have there. And let's see. So we have a first one's a comment that they passed that, and they did be 1, 2, and 3. It sounds like you're down in that same area. So I would encourage, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to jump in and put them in the chat pod, and we'll certainly jump in and answer those. We did have a question about earlier. Somebody had posted a question about deploying this type of technology in a variety of other places. Actually, the question was about deploying it on a Caribbean island. And the reality is it can be put pretty much anywhere. So again, we talked about the front of meter and behind the meter. Behind the meter could be put on a rooftop if again, in the scenario that was presented, whether it's at a resort or whether it's over a parking lot. And we see a lot of parking lots in some of the more tropical locations because of the heat. So we see panels that are placed there. We see them on stadiums, even here in Pennsylvania. But panels can be put in an awful lot of different places. There's also some new technology out there that solar could be then the top of large industrial buildings, that it would be lighter, or it could be on the top of or the side of buildings, or windows could be made into types of solar panels. So there's a variety of ways that could be done. And we'll just have to see where those technologies go. And certainly that's a big place that a lot of that research is heading right now. But I think it's also imperative for us to talk about where the conversation seems to be, and where a lot of the concern is with this type of development is with land use. And that's probably the number one question that I get, and the place where most people resist solar development is around the topic of land use. Meaning, and we saw a very similar thing with a shale, although on the shale side, you didn't see as much land tied up, and certainly not as much farmland tied up. There was some, certainly, and there still is. But with solar, we're seeing a lot more, and that's a place where township supervisors and residents are asking a lot more of those questions, and certainly from the ag community. So it's a place we're doing research. I work in the College of Ag at Penn State, so it's a place that's very near and dear to our research criteria as well. So if you have questions about that, we can talk about that as well. We also had a question about solar waste. I mentioned about the decommissioning, and I mentioned that there's value. The number I typically use is somewhere there's actually a range that we're using. It's somewhere between $525 a ton for the waste and $550 a ton. That number will likely change depending upon the commodities over the course of time, and where the technology goes to be able to extract the different components from the waste panels as they're decommissioned. The panels typically are going to be guaranteed for 20 to 30 years. The guarantees on those panels are actually getting longer as the technology improves and becomes more and more durable. We get questions about, well, will they go back at the end of that life, that 20, 25 years, will they go back and take all the panels out and decommission the site, or will they actually reuse the site for other types of energy production and likely for solar energy production? Well, most leases, which is where all this starts, most leases have a provision in there for an extension or extension clause. That can be for 5 years or 5-year increments. It could be for another 20, 25 years, or it could be for like terms that were in the first lease. So companies could come back in and they could pull the panels out, use a racking system in the infrastructure that's already in place, meaning all the wiring and the poles and things of that nature, and just put new technology in there. There's stack technology that's at lab scale at this point, where you can have a panel over a panel, the first panel being somewhat translucent, like the windows that I talked about earlier that could be solar panels, that you could stack that over the panels that are similar to what the technology is that you see now, and you would increase your, you certainly would increase your efficiency, which is what all companies and all government labs and university labs are working on right now. One of the benefits of that, it might not come to mind right away, but you would need less land to make the same amount of power. So we see more and more demand for the power, but that certainly has an impact on the land use as well. Okay, so what about some of the other questions that we have in chat? When they come, I see one here, when they come around in our neighborhood selling solar panels for our rooftops, should we consider that? Well, you know, one of the things that I should have said in the beginning that I'll say right now is we're not advocating for solar. We're trying to explain what the system is. We're trying to explain what the panels are and how they work, the technology. We're trying to talk about the pros and cons, you know, where are the challenges that are out there. And like the solar again, when we talk about challenges, I like to talk about, well, what's the mitigation, or what's the options to overcome some of those challenges as they might occur. So whether you should put them on your rooftop is really a personal decision. What I will tell you is there are some good cost calculators out there that will tell you what the payback period would be if you decided to put those panels on your roof. It would also give you some kind of illustration as to what the value might be in terms of a resale value. We also see information out there from realtors associations, for instance, that talk about that resale value as well. Typically, you're going to see a payback somewhere. It depends on the cost of the panels, depends on the amount of power they produce. It depends on the market that you're in, meaning what is the market going to pay for the power, or what are you offsetting in terms of power that you're not buying? All those are factors. So it's pretty impossible to tell you just here, you know, a real hard number. But those calculators allow you to put some of those variables in there and come up with a payback period timeline that'll give you a clearer picture as to what that would mean for you. Typically, you're looking at something that might be in the 6 to 10 year range, again, depending upon the cost and all those other variables that I mentioned a moment ago. We have a question here: how long will it take for solar and wind power to become the main source for powering the grid? Is it even feasible? It's certainly, well, let me take the first part there, become the main source for powering the grid. It's hard to tell how long that will be, but I think part of the answer to that is if you look at the amount of power that's coming into the grid for the last, we'll say 2 years of time, most of the power that was coming in from renewables, and most of that was coming in from solar and wind, because you have some other potential from renewables as well, hydro and some other things. So solar and wind is where most of that is coming in, and that's because the cost of that from an entry level standpoint is actually has become the cheapest in most cases. Now, more recently, that has become a little more challenged because of power costs and where they've gone, and global influences, including the war overseas, is having an impact in that as well. So again, a variety of things that are having an impact and are a consideration there. But I think it talks to the feasibility, and it talks to the whether they'll become the main source when you look at where those trends are in terms of the cost for that power to come in. The other factor that I think answers part of that question is if you look at where the most of the large industrial PPAs right now, power purchase agreements, just like the one Penn State has, most of those are going towards renewables, and a lot of those are going towards solar and wind. So that's also, I think, a big part of the answer that you're looking. So the major power producers, meaning the power generation facilities, are leaning that way, not totally that way. Gas still is producing roughly 40% on a national basis. We have a lot of nuclear locked in. There's some new nuclear being built. Where that'll go in the future is still to be seen. So I think that's certainly a big part of the answer to that question. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I will mention if you have any others, throw them in there. We have just a couple minutes remaining. I didn't get a question about the community solar, but my guess is there's probably some questions in people's mind. Is it going to happen? Can you purchase it? Again, if you're here in Pennsylvania, the answer is no at the moment. If you were in New York State, for instance, I have a house up in New York State, and we get things in our bills that we could purchase community solar, and it's sold by subscription. So there's 30, 40 acre type facilities. They'll sell about 70% of the power that could be generated by subscription to people that might be in that region, not just within that community, but within that region that local grid is serving. And once they hit the 70% mark, that company moves on and starts to sell at another location nearby. So that would be community solar. So why am I bringing that up again? Well, there is that leasing going on in Pennsylvania for that. And there are companies that are looking to push forward with that. There's a Senate bill and there's a House bill. Currently, in both of those branches here in Pennsylvania, they've been there. They've been introduced several times. They're there currently, and we'll see where they go here within the state this year, or if they don't make it this year, where they might go in one of the years in the near future. So that's going to be a big part of the dialogue as we think about solar production here in Pennsylvania going forward. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. I think we're going to bring it to a close. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. I would mention that we have a lot of webinars that we're doing. You're more than welcome to come to the webinars that we do going forward. We do them on the agrivoltaics specifically. We do them on leasing. We do them on ordinance development. We're also going around the state. We have a team of people, and we're going to different counties and municipalities around the state to help them learn about where solar is going, and also about what they would need to do if they wanted to put a solar ordinance in place to be prepared if these type of facilities were to show up in their respective locations. And if you remember the map that I showed you with the 500 of them spread across the state, we do see most counties are facing some sort of proposed development, and likely that will continue going forward. So having a lease in place or a ordinance in place, solar ordinance in place for solar, for a front of meter, meaning community and a utility or grid scale being the same, it would be positioning the township or county to have that in place to be ready for that. So again, if you have any other questions, again, I'm Tom Murphy at the Penn State Marcellus Center for Outreach and Research. We're going to have a solar component to our ordinance or to our website here shortly, but I know this session tonight here is recorded. You're welcome to go to that as well. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for coming to this session for the Penn State Alumni Association. Thank you and have a great night.